Hello? No. Good afternoon. I hope everybody enjoyed the nice lunch. And now we are back with our fourth panel, I in the humanities, and I will ask to come to the stage Renata Vassamanda USP.
So good. I'm not a speaker now, so good afternoon, and thank you everybody for being here after such a wonderful lunch. So I'm here just to introduce our three speakers of this panel. We are going to have three talks. The first one by Professor Christian Burkhardt from Frankfurt, and then the second one by Professor Diogo Cortes from the Pontifical University Catholic University of São Paulo, and Nick BR, and then Claudio Pinhanes from IBM Research Brazil, and USP, and C4AI, which he will let you know. I'm going to introduce one by one when they give the talk. So the talks will be in this order, and then we'll have time for discussion as well. And I take the chance now to thank all the organization here and my colleagues in the scientific committee for this program here. So we are starting with Professor Christoph Burkhardt, who's the founding speaker of the Center for Critical Computational Studies, and he's going to talk about critical computational literacy, which is a very important topic for us here, and that we were discussing a lot in the breaks, how much people need to know before we start building systems or using systems. So please, Christoph, the floor is yours.
Forward and backwards. Okay. There, he's going to open.
Okay. So before the PowerPoint comes on, and there it is, not? Yeah, there it is. I have to make three starting confessions, or three problems. The first problem is that it's right after lunch, so it falls to me to wake you up a little bit. Being a lawyer, that's the second confession, that is a difficult task, because we lawyers tend to be not so entertaining, maybe. Let's see what I can do. Also, with respect to the problem that as a lawyer, maybe my being in the humanities section is somewhat particular, but I hope that I will interpret the humanities in such a broad way to encompass also some legal approaches to it. And I think that the wonderful speeches that we had so far quite nicely fit into my talk. And the third problem that I do have is that my talk has to end in 20-minute sharp, because in 20-minute sharp we have a new pope, as you might have seen. So at 7 European time, or at 2 o'clock Brazilian times, I presume that everyone will scroll through their mobile phones. Probably it will not be me being a pope, although I would be eligible, I think, but I'm seemingly not. So I will promise to be as fast as possible, also because I want to see who the Pope is. So on AI and the humanities, what you see here is, of course, an AI-generated picture. As it was mentioned yesterday, they become somewhat boring, also because these pictures, one cannot interact with them. You know, I cannot basically touch the screen and, oh, it does. See, there is some animation that I just got via Zora. So you see that the steps are to be taken. So what are the AI and the humanities? I offer some initial reflections on that before I briefly then introduce my thoughts on critical computational literacy. When it comes to AI and the humanities, what seems to be, there seems to be a dichotomy in the back of our minds. Of course, these are grand simplifications, but I think there is some truth to them. So a first simplification is that there is the natural, the real, the hard sciences on the one hand, and then there's the humanities on the other side. This somewhat correlates, although of course I'm very aware that this is a grand simplification, to different epistemologies and ontologies of how we approach AI. From a natural scientific point of view, you approach AI or the world from a mostly, oftentimes, from a positivistic point where you want to explain the world. Whilst from a humanities point of view, oftentimes you seek to interpret the world, you seek to understand the world as contingent, as something that can be this way or the other way, so you historicize it, you criticize it. And this also leads to different ontologies of what AI is, and we've heard a little bit on this, that AI is, on the one hand, cast as a mere tool, can be used for the good or for the better, but it's a tool that we humans control, where I would hold, from a humanities perspective, also critical perspective, that AI is related to worlds making. It reconstitutes our normative orders. It reconstitutes how we are. It may unmake the worlds that we are living in, remake them, perpetuate current power structures. So this is a different ontology behind it. And if we do not address this properly, there is a fear that comes up, especially in the humanities side, and that is up here, that humanities, especially if you read AI in the humanities, that either when positivism or this tool thinking is introduced into the humanities, that the humanities as a contingent AI as world-making approach collapses, or is being colonized to an extent by a different epistemology and ontology. So what I would rather explore also in my talk is how AI can be with the humanities and the humanities with AI, so that AI is not introduced into the humanities. There is not this fear of collapse or colonization, but a mutual exchange, a dialogue, as this conference is also called and labeled. This is what we try. Renata was so nice to mention this, what we try at the Center for Critical Computational Studies at Frankfurt. I will not talk more about this, but this is the attempt to bridge different epistemologies and ontologies on computational technologies, including, of course, AI. Now, what is AI literacy? What I would like to do is to briefly walk you through a development from AI literacy to critical computational literacy, where AI literacy and obviously all the nice moving effects that I had in place are gone. The AI literacy is a legal term, so here is finally where, as a lawyer, I can also tell you something. It's a legal term now which is provided for in the EU AI Act. Basically, it obligates providers and deployers of AI to ensure a certain level of AI literacy, and this is not only a European thing, because it also then applies to providers and deployers of AI systems that have their place of establishment outside the European Union, but they have AI which is used in the Union. So this is also something that is now applicable by extent to other countries, including Brazil. If you look then into what AI literacy means, there is a lot in the EU AI Act to interpret. I would subscribe to what was yesterday said by Janet Hoffman, that these are terms that are interpretable, open, chaotic. It is defined as something that means that there's skills, knowledge, and understanding on the side of providers, deployers, and affected persons to operate AI safely. Now, what does that mean? That's a good question. That is what the legal industry will now have fun times to write a lot about, and to also write legal opinions about. One thing that emerges in the literature on AI literacy is that an ethical and maybe critical understanding is now also becoming part of this AI literacy move. According to a recent overview article AI literacy means that AI literate persons must be able to understand and judge ethical issues to ensure that the use and development of future AI technology are based on principles such as inclusivity, equitable access, and minimizing the potential for bias. And of course, we could go on and on what other normative values, and if value is not the correct term that we want to use, interests, critical considerations we want to insert into AI literacy. However, if you then look into how that is operationalized, you will find, at least in many places, including especially in Germany, that most of the formats that are in place are what we could call additive. So you do computational studies, and then you do the ethics course. Or vice versa, you start by critically reflecting on something that you might not really technically understand, criticize power structures, and then you do some basic coding. So this doesn't seem to work, at least in Germany. So we talk a lot with partners, beginning in basically primary schools, up to international and transnational corporations. This additive approach, so a C and then another C added on the other C, is not something that really seems to be working well. There is also this approach that it's mostly thought as skilling, so we have to ensure that AI literacy leads to certain skills on especially individuals. However, this is a move that you find often in times of crisis, that you want to pedagogize, educationalize, if you will, crisis solution from what we see so far, at least in the countries that I did some empirical work on, or that we tried to gather empirical findings. This skilling approach is not really working in practice. I would love to hear whether that is different in Brazil. And if you look deeper, this AI literacy is not really addressing the digital divide that is now, of course, deepened by AI, because people who are not really buying into AI literacy will not be empowered to use it in the future, who have to watch some videos online to have an ethics course or vice versa, will not really get into AI or a critical reading of AI, so that initial digital divide upon which the whole system is built is actually rather deepened than closed. For the EU AI Act, to just give an excursus on the legal side, a critical reading, maybe also picking up what Jeanette Hoffmann said yesterday, once Article 4 of the EU AI Act is mainly seen as a compliance norm, where deployers, etc., of AI need to ensure a certain level of AI knowledge literacy on the side of certain persons, and the most important part is to have your boxes ticked. It doesn't really solve any possible problems. So it rather becomes industrious and not, if you will, normative. And even going a step further, it perpetuates the big players that are already on the market, because of course ensuring AI literacy is something that takes efforts and is also costly, so that the big players that are already in the market will have a grand advantage over those who are not. So it rather shields the playing field and not levels the playing field. Is this what we, in inverted commas, we want? I have my doubts. This is where I would love to move from AI literacy to critical computational literacy, to give you, if you will, another idea of how one can read AI literacy. So critical computational literacy as an evolution, not a break from, but an evolution of AI literacy. So critical computational literacy, as we understand it at C3S, is more of a transformative framework, one that interweaves computational with critical empowerment. So it does this additive approach, rather it treats the critical and the computational not as separate domains, but to try and to develop formats that really embeds critical reflection and technical learning and vice versa, to foster a genuine cross-disciplinary literacy. And this is not only to empower people to shape digital infrastructures. I know that we are very much in this modern idea of shaping now, that we can shape the world and such, and that is highly important, that we shape digital and AI technologies. But also there is a critical side to that. We need also to empower people to notice, to address, to become aware where power asymmetries are such that it is no longer shapeable, that technology, and that it is something that we need to be aware, that we need to experience as something that has become to an extent unshapeable because big companies, for example, in the not only global north, but rather in particular countries of the global north, are, for example, in control of key technologies and key data sets. So this double meaning of shaping and addressing the unshapeability is what makes critical computational literacy critical and computational. Summarizing this, the idea is that we do not want to fall trap to this idea that we need to solve everything by education or rather by pedagogic skilling. Critical computational literacy, also we suggest, is something that is grounded in technological expertise, but then combines that with, German term, Gesellschaftskritik, a critique of society, becoming aware of underlying power structures, becoming aware of inequities, inequalities that permit societies, but of course our international, global, planetary relations. There is an ABC of this critical and the computational. So we do not want, again, to only focus on skills. What we think is more important to especially also address attitudes, the implicit in how to approach certain computational or AI technologies. So are you really inherently programmed, situated? Have you subjectivized a certain critical approach to what you do? We want to do this with regard to different biographies, so from the cradle to the grave, with clear regard of where people are coming from, also then hence taking note of the above-mentioned digital divides. And what we want to provide on the explicit level is not skills, but capacities to shape, and on the other hand, to address and to notice that which is no longer shapeable. Making a long story short, I think it's also important not only to look to individuals and how they can be equipped with critical computational literacy to address this post-digital world where the digital or AI has become so normal that we are so used to it that we don't recognize it. So post-digital not in the end, but in the normalization of the digital. But we also need to address organizations, and if you can go up the whole ladder, normative orders as such. Because individuals are important, but organizational learning and organizational capacity building, attitude building, biography awareness is as important. And then, of course, coming up on the biggest, highest level of normative orders, we need to also see how our democracies, democratic orders, can be sufficiently made resilient or adaptive, question mark, both very tricky terms to truly address imminent challenges. I wouldn't say problems, but how we address this. And formats that we are currently develop, especially, but not only, but especially focus on experience. So to really bring to the attention of those using these technologies how they are implicitly approaching certain subject matters. I'll get back to that in a second. So my appeal to you is to stay critical. And I also asked Zora, so the AI tool which so far created pictures, to now create videos, and I asked it to transform this picture into a Brazilian flag, and maybe tell me what's wrong. So what's wrong with this? The phrase. Anything else? See, what you're looking at that picture, but maybe there is more to it. I mean, this is me using it, so maybe I'm more tech friendly than others. Maybe there's also a problem that this source comes from the US, so that there is far more than the mere picture that you see. There is also a problem that I paid dearly for this, so I had to pay for a pro account. So this is not on your open access ChatGPT, everyone can use it account. So we have an inherent power structure in there. It comes from the global, not the global north. It comes from the center, Silicon Valley. Germany is very much on the periphery on that side. So I know it's very. And that's the danger, I would say. It looks, of course, very wrong, because I noticed that too, because something is strange with the stars and the text doesn't make any sense. But there is, I think, even more to it. More, if you will, problems related to the very generation of that video than meets the first eyes. And that is what maybe the idea of teaching experience, to really notice what one looks on. As a human, we are very much trained to look on, okay, there's 6 fingers, or there is a wrong text there, but maybe there is more underlying this. And if critical computational literacy is about something, it is trying to bring that to the fore and to exhibit that in this very generation of this video, there is a whole infrastructure of exploitation. There is inherent power structures. There are grave ethical issues very much built into this. I used 20 minutes and 15 seconds, and let's see who the Pope is. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Christoph. That was a very interesting talk. We want to know who the Pope is. So is it out yet? Not yet, okay. So we'll start the next talk then. And the next talk will be given by Diogo Cortis, as a professor, as I said, at the Pontifical Catholic University of São Paulo, and also researcher at NIC BR. And the topic goes very well with the end of Christoph's talk, so about how things are shaping our life.
Thank you. You know, I'm a little bit anxious because I'm professor at the Pontifical Catholic University of São Paulo, and our High Chancellor is Dom Odilo, that's the Archbishop of São Paulo, and he's participating in conclave right now. So imagine if he is the next Pope. I would have my certificates and diploma signed by the Pope. That would be amazing. So let's see. I'm here to talk about AI and language representation. So I'm professor at the PUC São Paulo, but I'm also researcher at the Brazilian Network Information Center, especially in a department called Web Technology Study Center. And we are performing some researches regarding the web ecosystem, and data, and how it is being used by AI for different kinds of perspective. For example, to train new AI models, the impact that it will have in the whole digital and the digital economy, because we are seeing a lot of fundamental changes on the way the people interact with the information and how they are changing the behavior. For example, if we look to search engines, it will be an impact on the whole web system. But we also have some researches on for creating data sets, and that's what I will talk here. So it's obvious that AI and data is like almost the same thing, because at least the current models, when we are talking about LLMs, large language models, we need a lot of data. So it's important to discuss not only AI, but also data, and that I will try to discuss with you in my time here. And to start, I think that we heard a lot in the last years one phrase, that data is the new oil, right? And I think that it's not the best metaphor that we need to discuss when you are talking about data, because data is not the new oil, because data is a non-rival common, because in economics we have this concept of rivality, and data is non-rival. So if I use the data, other people, other organizations can also use the data. So it's one principle, one concept that we need to start to thinking again. And it will make sense in my final argument. So I'm bringing this kind of reflection in the beginning of my presentation, but at the end I will bring an argument that will make sense. And we needed to ask who owns the data and who does the data represent. And I will start my presentation trying to give an overview for the second question, and then I will go to the first question. And to start this conversation, we need to see and understand that even though all commercial large language models speak in different languages, they do not represent the languages on the same way. And here is one example from Meta. They have the Llama. The Llama, it's an open source model. So because it's open source, we have a little bit more information about the model. So it's a statement from Meta. So they assume that, for example, on Llama, 5% of the pre-trained data sets is from non-English language. So 95% of the whole data set is based on English, and especially data set from the US. And even Meta assumes that, for example, we do not expect the same level of performance in this language as in English. But we also have some other studies about this. And this one is from Max Tegmark from MIT, that he studied the representation of space and time in different aspects of the world. And here, space and time, I mean historical data, information about an event in some place, information about, for example, a festival in some place, a soccer team, and they prepare a study about this, and here's the representation. So I just to show a graphic image to represent what I'm trying to say. But we also have some other studies, and this study is very interesting, very important, because it's a collective effort from different organizations, from MIT, Carmelo, Coherent for AI, University of California, Irvine, and they try to provide an audit of the main data sets used for training AI. And the name of the project is called the Data Provenance Initiative. And here, it's a complete study because they show different kinds of licensing, who is producing, who is using, and also the representation of the data set. And here is one example of data site licensing. And for example, 85% of the data sets, the most common used data sets for training AI, requires attribution. But as you know, for example, all the commercial LLMs, they do not provide attribution. Actually, we know, for example, Meta used like illegal books to train AI. So it's like a war to collect more and more data and use it. If it's legal or illegal, it doesn't matter. And here is an information about who creates the data set, at least the most used data sets for training AI. And as you can see, academic organizations is responsible for almost 70%, followed by industry labs and research institutions. And the data sets are sourced primarily from online encyclopedias, social media, and scrapped from general web. And this aspect of scrapped from general web is something that we are seeing increasing a lot. So nowadays we have like a bot war occurring nowadays. For example, because the traffic from bots is increasing so much. 2 weeks ago, we have a discussion with Wikimedia Foundation, that's the organization responsible for Wikipedia, and the traffic increased in the last year 50%. And this increase was because of the chatbots trying to collecting data. And it's increasing the money that Wikimedia needed to spend to keep those servers alive. So it's changing a lot the way we understand this digital ecosystem. But this is just to bring an overview about who creates and from where the data is coming, from the major data sets. But this study also shows language representation. And as we can see here, for example, English-speaking and Western European nations are best represented, while the Global South see limited coverage. And this is one topic that we are discussing a lot. The Brazilian Internet Steering Committee organizes, for example, one forum from the, how can I say in English? Lusophony? Portuguese-speaking countries, okay? All the Portuguese-speaking countries to discuss this topic. It's a forum about governance, internet governance, but there is one specific topic about representation of Portuguese, also on those data sets. But it's not only based on text, we also need to discuss about multimodal data. And here is one study that we performed to analyze how those AI models, but here especially on Midjourney, it was a study we performed 2 years ago, how it represents the most popular festivals in Brazil. And I will show some examples here. This is the real image of the event. So it's called the Paritins Festival. I know that there are people that's not from Brazil. So Paritins Festival is an annual folklore celebration in the Brazilian Amazon, where 2 teams, Garantido e Caprichoso, 2 teams, compete in a theatrical and musical showcase inspired by indigenous, Afro-Brazilian, and regional myths. Actually, there is one main character on this festival that is the bull. So each team has one bull and the bull compete. But when we try to generate and we try hard with different prompts, it's almost impossible to create an image from this festival. That's very popular and famous in Brazil. And sometimes when the system understands that the model is related to something with indigenous or Afro-Brazilian, he tried to create this image. But as you can see here, it imports like semiotic signs from American culture. For example, we see Apache culture bring it to the image. And we also have, and this is very interesting, because we have another religious festival that's called Círio de Nazaré. And the system is very crazy about this. He created this beach because of Nazaré Beach in Portugal, where we have the surf and we try hard. And this study was performed 2 years ago, and sometimes we try again, and sometimes it's improving, okay? But the question is, how much is it improving? And to give more evidence for you, I bring the Data Provenance Initiative that was launched 2 years ago. In the end of last year, they launched a new study, okay, to see how it is improving. And as we can see here, in the figure, in the title of the figure, representation is not improving, okay? So here we have and now we have text. For example, we see the representation, for example, from Global South is not improving. For speech, is not improving. And for video, it's even worse, it's not improving. And someone can say, oh, okay, but I can use ChatGPT, Llama, Meta, Google Gemini, and it replies for me in Portuguese, and it's sometimes, or in most cases, it replies correctly. Yes, it's true. Sometimes they just translate. We have a metaphor that's not the best one, but we say that for example, when we are trying to discuss this, we say that the AI, the LLM, is like a foreigner trying to speak in Portuguese, because he can speak in Portuguese, but sometimes it's thinking in English, or the pressure of the major language on the output is very clear for us. And it's very important for some specific use cases, and it's matter for some specific use cases, especially because AI is being used to infer human subjectivity. And here I bring one project that we also performed in the Web Technology Study Center, in the Brazilian Network Information Center, in partnership with the National Institute of Neuroscience, Affective Neuroscience, to discuss how AI can infer about emotions. Okay, we do not believe, and we have a lot of evidence that it's not possible to infer emotions from human facial expression. And we also organized a workshop at IGF, that's the Internet Governance Forum from United Nations. And we organized this workshop together with Microsoft and also some other universities. And it was clear that was not possible to do this. And even Microsoft, they had a system to to classify human emotions from facial recognition, and then they retired the system, so it's not used anymore. But we can use AI to try to identify emotional engagement on text. For example, if one person is speaking about emotion, or what emotion that person is speaking of. And we are trying to develop one model here in Brazil to use in different organizations. So it was a project together with the Neuroscience Institute, and it could be used for different research, from social neuroscience to see engagement on political context, or for diagnosis in health. But here is one example to show the importance of creating data sets based on specific language and culture. Because there are more, but the two main approaches from human emotions. One is the basic emotion theory that is very present on the move inside out. So we have fixed and basic emotions, but we do not have more evidence about this anymore. So we are moving, or when I say we, I mean the academic on this kind of research in the affective neuroscience is moving more towards the construction approach, okay? That's one approach that we rely so much on language and culture. And we have a lot of studies, not from neuroscience only, but from anthropology and sociology, that emotion is a construction. And even when we have, for example, the same emotions that has a direct translation from different languages, the people understand these emotions differently. So it's important to understand how we can use this, because we have a lot of data sets from human emotions, but they are on English. And they are made by American organization. So when you try to replicate this on Brazil, we identify that there are a lot of lacks, loopholes in the data set, and sometimes it does not work for us. So we need to create our own data set. Because, for example, there is one data set that's very famous, that's called Go Emotion. That's one data set created by Google, but it's in English. And sometimes the people just translate to other language and train a new model, but it does not work. So we need an effort to create a new data set. So we collect data. We have neuroscientists and linguistics annotating the data. Here's that motion, and we create a new models for this purpose. So that's one project that we did. But what actions can we take? Because as you see, we have an overview of the lack of some languages on those models, the impact this for some user cases, and what actions can we take? Of course, we need to promote the creation of curated data sets in different languages, and I think this connects very well with what Claudio will present after. That's one topic that is part of the Brazilian National AI Plan now, so there is some tasks to invest not only on models, but to create new data sets. But I want to propose a new discussion, and I think that we need to move toward this. And this is related to the argument that I bring at the beginning. We need to think data as a non-rival common. And we need to develop public policies to promote access to data about Brazilian generated major platforms. Because what is happening today is we are generating a lot of data every day. Brazilians are generating data, and it's a valuable resource. But we develop this data inside what we call walled gardens. That are those big platforms. For example, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and so on. And they are collecting those data. And that's okay, they are improving their system, okay? But how, as Brazilian researchers, as a Brazilian startup, as a Brazilian government, can also have access to this data to train our own model? Because otherwise, we are just giving those big platforms our value. And as we see, data has value. It's not the new oil, because they can use, but we also can use, and we should use our own data. So we need to discuss more about this and thinking on policies, regulation, legislation, about how we can use our own data for our own purpose. So that's one message that I want to share with you. Thank you so much. Obrigado. Do we have a new pope? Yes. Really? American? Oh, really? Oh, okay. No, thank you so much.
So no Brazilian Pope this time. So the final speaker of this session is Claudio Pinhanes. Oh, they're changing it. Where's the... sorry. I'm sorry, I'm coming out of a cold. So Claudio is here representing our industry partner, IBM Research, but he's also part of the University of São Paulo and the C4AI, the Center of AI. And he will present a project that has a lot of relation to what the previous speakers were doing, so Brazilian data.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, we have a new Pope, and I'm here to talk about endangered indigenous language in Brazil, which, especially in the past, had a lot of connections to the Catholic Church. But I'm not going to talk too much about the past. I'm going to talk about the present and the future of indigenous languages in Brazil. Let me see. They are trying to put... Yes, I think o modo de exibição está em slide, tem que colocar em modo apresentação. Configurar a apresentação do slide, por favor. Clique em configurar a apresentação do slide. Configurar a apresentação do slide, por favor. Clica ali. Não, eu sei como corrigir isso, por favor. Não, eu sei como. É que ele não sabe. Clica aí, é isso. Põe no primeiro botãozinho. O primeiro de cima, o de cima, o de cima, o de cima. Isso aí, vamos lá. Vamos lá, agora vai dar certo. Sorry, I had to coach the presenter. Thank you. So, my name is Claudio Pinhanes. I'm a researcher from IBM Research Brazil. I'm also the deputy director of the Center for AI of the University of São Paulo. Have been working for 40 years with AI and doing a lot of multidisciplinary work, but I don't think I've ever done a project so complex, so complicated like the one I'm doing now. But just to give you a context, IBM Research Lab in Brazil is about 100 people. It's part of a much larger organization of about 1,000, both in Rio and São Paulo. So this is where IBM is where I have been for the last 25 years. 5 years ago, we established a partnership with the support of FAPESP with the University of São Paulo. We created a C4AI. It's one of the leading AI labs in Brazil. Has about 100 faculty associated, 100 students every year. We are completing our 5th year. We have because we are born during the COVID, we have a strong presence in the internet. I'm not going to go into details. There are 6 main research lines, 2 involving NLP, and one of these is a project which I'm going to talk today around indigenous languages in Brazil. We call this project ProLind. It's mostly people from IBM Research, people from Computer Science Department, and people from the Linguistics Department in Brazil, a lot of students, occasional students from MIT, from ISPER, from Unicamp. And the main reason that we are doing this project is because we are in a state in the world where language diversity is decreasing quickly. About 7,000 languages are spoken in the world today. They estimate to be half of that by the end of the century. And this is a situation that particularly affects Brazil. This is a graph showing not only the main areas, but also the number of languages that are that are spoken, about 200, and how many speakers in each language. So no language in Brazil is spoken by more than 35,000 people, and many of those are below 1,000. We are interested mostly in the yellow part of this graph. And by the way, I didn't include here, in Germany there are about 30 languages, 11 of them are endangered. So in some ways there is also space there to work together. Okay, so we are focusing this range of languages that there is still substantial use, but they are under threat of disappearing. This is a very important theme, and because of this, UNESCO has established this decade of indigenous languages. But in the case of Brazil, there is another important reason for preserving indigenous languages, and that's because the indigenous peoples are the natural and best guardians of the Amazon forest. And language is an intrinsic part of their identity and culture. So when we preserve and we help them keep their languages alive, we are also helping them in their much larger task, which they are very good, which they have been doing for 15,000 years, which is not only preserving the forest, but making it better and more diverse. They have been building the forest for all this time, and when we keep them and their language and their culture alive, we are helping this larger goal. But we have to understand that while in the 20th century, people used to see language preservation as an issue that linguists would be interested in, I think it's very established now that when we move to the 21st century, you cannot ignore the issue of technology, of the presence of the internet. And because of this, and looking through this approach, this project is focused on two main questions. The first is, can these wonderful AI technologies for processing text and speech and so on, which is that has appeared in the last 5 years, be used to address those issues, especially in terms of strengthening the language, making people use more, helping education, or helping the documentation of the languages that are disappearing. And this is what this project is doing. We have 6 main areas of work. I'm going to go quickly in all of them. Don't have much time. If you have questions, anything specific, can look in the web later, or talk to me, or ask questions But the first one, I'm going to talk about our efforts creating translators for those languages. And this is something we have been doing for about 2-3 years. And we have to understand there's extremely small amounts of material in this language available. Okay? I mean, often translations are built in massive amounts of data. That's not true for a language that's spoken by 10,000 people. Okay, so what we have been doing is mostly in this approach of fine-tuning large language models with whatever data we can find. So for instance, we have been using a lot this German to English translator, which is very high quality. It was originally trained with 500 million sentence pairs. And then we collect in dictionaries, linguistic material, teaching materials, we collect 9K, 5K sentence. And somehow, when you do fine-tuning, it means one more round of training, it works. You produce a medium quality translation, which can be useful in this context. I want to just give a sense. Imagine this is Maracanã, okay? Or the Allianz Arena of Bayern Munich, 75,000 people. You train with 75,000 people, and then you take one person and do a fine-tuning. And whatever it was doing for everyone, now it's able to do for that person that has never seen before, okay? There's a name for this in machine learning, and that's called overfitting. And overfitting is not a problem in large language models, it's a feature And that's an incredible novelty which we are trying to understand. We have been publishing a lot of our discoveries on this process, trying to understand how this could possibly work and works, which sort of contradicts all the traditional data science theory if you think this way. Okay, so if you're interested, there is a lot of material there. What I want to talk next is about some of the actual ethical issues in doing what we are doing and how we are dealing with this. Okay, so the first one is the issue of data itself. So if you look at the traditional development cycle of AI, like you start crawling for data, do some training, you collect data from the users. This doesn't work with these communities. Why? There's no data to crawl. And second, it's very hard to collect data with them. They are very concerned about that, and they are right about that. So based on that, we have been working in this model where we center the development around community usage. We start with whatever data we can find in internet. We put them in the community use. We see what works. And based on that usage and need, we start talking about data collection, about data governance, and so on. You can, if your wife saying, I want to collect data for in 2 years, I'm going to give you some app, you're not going far with those communities. Okay, so that's what we are trying to do. We described this in these 2 papers. But most important, I think the most important ethical principle is that you have to work with these communities. And not only work with these communities, you have to work with the organizations of these communities. Okay, the most common symptom of colonization is when you ignore the power structures of those communities. So we have been doing this, we have been working with these communities. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Basically, now so far we have very intensive work with these 3 communities. The first one is one that's 50 kilometers away from here. Okay? I mean, we are in São Paulo. Along all the coast in São Paulo, there are indigenous groups. And particularly, so we have to get to them, which is not easy because they hide themselves in the forest. But you engage through their organizations, through people who work with them. And in the end, we start working with this community. This is still São Paulo City, technically. It's about 50 kilometers from here. It's called Tenão de Porã. They speak a language called Guarani-Mbiá. It's a variation of the Guarani, like Portuguese and Spanish, that level of difference. And after talking to them, they invited us to work with their high school students, to go every week there and see if we could develop technology that could make them write better. They did this, they said, come next week. So what we did, we took our translator, we put there, we have them use, it failed miserably, that was good. So they didn't see us gods, they didn't see us as node, and they start interacting. And based on this experience, we developed an initial version of systems to help indigenous people write in their own language. At that point, that community got really scared about the internet, and they said, we don't want to work with you guys anymore. We don't want our language in the internet. And we said, okay, thank you. We learned a lot. And we start to engage with other communities. In particular, we start to engage with communities that speak in Ngatu. Ngatu is a language spoken in the northern area of Brazil by many different indigenous peoples, about 20,000 people in many different variations. One of the reasons we had one expert in the linguistics department of USP. So we went there. This is how far. We have 4 hours to Manaus, 2 hours flight to São Gabriel. Arrived there. We had engaged with the FOIRNI, which is a major organization in that area, 750 communities, 23 peoples. So one of the most organized indigenous federations in the world. This gives a sense of the area they cover. okay? This is Amazon. Everything is big, it's far, it's difficult. So they suggested us to work with the Barés. Took a boat, 5 hours to this area. This was our hotel. And one thing that we immediately saw that that area is going through a transformation. And the transformation is the arrival of fast internet through Starlink. But you see, they used to have radio internet, which is terrible. And so we went there. We had meetings with the leadership, the students. This is a community with 20 families, middle school. And they told us, yes, we need you to help us, our kids, to write more and better. And then we went to the larger community, 100 families. Again, we talked to them, showed to the students. And these are bilingual students. They read and they talk in both languages, Portuguese and Nhangatu. They read and write. And we asked them, in which language you write in the internet? They said Portuguese. Nobody used their own language in the internet. And why? Because the keyboard doesn't help, because there is no error correction, because no resources, search does not work in their language, and so on. So at the same time, they want internet. It's changing completely. So based on that, we say, okay, let's see if our tools help your kids move their language to the internet, okay? And one thing we looked at is, right now they're used to write in their own language in pen and paper. But in the 21st century, after that, you don't. After school, you don't use pen and paper, you do digital form, and it's terrible to write using current tools. So what we developed is these tools, both for cellular phones and the web. I'm going to, if you could click the image, it would be great. So you can see the video. Let me see if I can. I cannot. Can I do that? No. Oh, I can. So this is just an idea of, so it has electronic dictionary, it has translation, it has word completion, has, so this is going to, it's suggestion for next word, you can do translation. Not perfect, but better than nothing. Okay, have a little problem. Okay, both. Anyway, you get the idea. But more important, there is a button in the top right corner where say you can share. So you can right there share to WhatsApp. You can go to WhatsApp and share back and work and so on. And we are going to try this starting July. We are going to set up 2 digital classrooms in those communities. And we are going to have weekly classes of writing with their teachers, trying to use this and try to improve this technology and see if the kids move this technology to the rest of the community, because they are the first adopters. And the community is very excited about that. FOID is very excited. We just signed the deal. We got a private donor to pay for the equipment. And in July, we spend a week and we start this. This is a pilot for the rest of the year. We are also doing some work closer to here, some more traditional work on revitalization with a community about 2 hours from here in the coast. They speak a language called Guarani Andeva, common in the south of Brazil. There are only 3 people in the community who speak the language, and they want to teach the kids. So we are going through a process of collection initially, and then we are going to try to use AI tools to create teaching materials in that language. There's also a project of revitalization of language. I'm not going to enter in details here, but basically to try a language that nobody speaks anymore, and can we create, based on documents, can we create translators, can we create systems that work for that language. I want to close. I think I'm doing well in time, right? with a final discussion, just saying, well, we have been very active publishing this. This project has attracted a lot of attention and has helped us to create a lot of technology, has helped us to question a lot of technology, and a lot of beliefs that the community have around these issues. For instance, the community believes in multilingual systems. We show that multilingual systems do not work better than no multilingual system. And second, indigenous communities don't want their languages mixed with other languages. So they see very negative, the idea, in a very negative way, the idea of multilingual systems. As I said, we had a lot of coverage, it's an issue that interests many different groups and many different kinds of constituents. So we think it's a very, of course those organizations know it's important, but the understanding that this technology that is here, especially large language models, can really help this is something that's not sort of crossing people's minds. And I would say even more that without this technology, we couldn't do anything. 5 years ago, I could not build a translator for these languages. It's only because we have large language models, transformer-based, that we can do that, okay? We have a more ambitious view of this idea that we can work together to create generic models for these languages with the help of the communities, with the usage of the communities, with a focus on the needs of the communities. Also as a way for languages that are dying to preserve the language in a more active form. Instead of preserving as recordings, as writings, you preserve it as something you can talk to, as a model that you can interact with. Okay, this is a longer term view. And I think one important thing that I want to bring, especially to this community, because we are talking about collaborations and doing work together, is the idea that I think it's time to build a place for these technologies to be developed and live. I mean, this is a long-term project. I'm not sure for how long I can interest IBM to be involved with this. I mean, corporates change. And at the same time, I think more and more the governance of this has to be shared, has to be worked together with the indigenous people. So I think it's really, we are in a very good moment to think, can we build up a place where researchers, communities, indigenous leaderships manage research and create initiatives and take care of code and take care of data for this specific issue. So we can have this in long term. And again, I'm thinking this about Brazil, but this is something that could be shared with, it should be shared with all other indigenous peoples of the world and other countries that have interests similar. Once when I was talking about this in a United Nations forum, and an ambassador from, this was in Chile, an ambassador from Malta, raised his hand and said, well, we have Maltese. Maltese is a language that's dying. It's the only Arabic language written in Roman alphabet. And what you're doing could help our kids and our communities the same way that you're helping the indigenous people in Brazil. So I think this is a common problem, but we need to understand that technology is part of the solution. And for this we need a little more, or I would say even much more organization, much more long-term resources and commitment that we have now from multiple actors in this field. We are honored to be one of this and having worked with all these communities and people. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank our three speakers for the very interesting and provocative talks. And we are going to be open for discussion. I see some people, I don't know, there's one question here.
So thank you for the nice presentations. Claudio, I have curiosity. So the solutions that you provided until now, they are for translation basically, right? So do you have also are you willing to have the next step, for instance, on having an avatar to like speak that language, like and interact with the indigenous peoples?
Well, first, I mean, we have built translators, but mostly what we found most effective in our first engagement were word completion, which was also AI-based, word correction, and this stuff. What we would like to do is to have all this coming from the same model. So we could sort of use the same data to generate all of that and also simplify future deployments, okay? But right now, I mean, a lot of our focus is in sometimes a lot things that are simple but make a lot of difference. The other question was about avatars. That's synthesizing speech requires collection, and that's something we are not doing. So we are trying to avoid to talk about collection until we have a sense from the community that what we're building is useful. We understand that it's going to have speech. Speech is going to be something. But there's a very interesting question whether a computer can be indigenous. Computers are white, okay? We have to be very clear about that. I have done some work on African-American text-to-speech systems, and people have a hard time recognizing an African-American voice from a computer because they're expected to be white. So it's a very delicate thing when you think about avatars. And there was a famous case of someone who put a bot of an avatar, impersonating an indigenous person, and it was shut down by the community in 1 week. So it's very delicate territory often.
Thank you. We have a question from Jeanette.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question to Christoph. You mentioned several times this idea of that we need to shape our future, which of course is technical to a large extent. On the one hand, we have said over the last 20, 30 years, again and again, technology does not follow its own logic. It's shaped by the cultures and societies in which it is used and which sort of give a direction to it. But when we now look at technical development, it seems so complex that it's very difficult, if not nearly impossible, to ascribe changes we see to any forces. So I would be interested to hear how you, in your new research center, approach this difficult question, particularly since you have also a normative approach to it.
Thanks, Jeanette, for putting some salt in the wound, I guess. But the easy answer for the dean would be to say this is for the new colleagues then to figure out, and that is, of course, the easiest way. That indeed what we want to do is bring in people who, in collaboration and in cross-disciplinary dialogue, address this issue of how much this modern idea of shaping is still possible, and to what extent we are living already in an co-constituted, if at all, life world where shaping is delicate at best and impossible at worst. Especially then if we then try to break with classical Eurocentric thinking and also bring in other cultures and the such, where our categories fail, but who are nevertheless very much turning towards these technologies. I mean, this is the interesting, I think, a lesson that I took from the Amazon, that Starlink is at this very moment radically changing that region, while at the same time you cannot do the European thing and say, oh, let's keep nature pure and let's do not do Starlink there, because that would cut off these communities also from health care, from education, from the world, basically, because the Amazon is big. So this is where we need to, in C3S, and where do we actually bring people in with a majority world background who will not only try, who will question and put upside down, hopefully, this Eurocentric thinking of modernity to an extent. So shaping, unshapeability, and that very dichotomy, testing that dichotomy to what extent we need to adapt that, what extent being aware of the fact that this also very Frankfurter idea of let's going back to nature is not feasible as well. I don't know whether that is a sufficiently clear answer, but we need to bring in, or we are at least aware of the many difficulties, I think, or some of the difficulties that we are facing.
I can add one thing. I think there's a long tradition in not what we call now the global south, in transforming technology that people don't understand and appropriating. And the indigenous peoples are masters in this, of getting a technology that they often don't know how it's made, how often don't know and fully understand how it works, and using it in new creative ways that match their reality, because it was designed for another reality. This is true for most of, if you see most poor communities in the world. And so there is part of this shaping does not require a fully understanding of the technology, as all the technologies in the past. They will do in different ways. In fact, we are using this as part of our design process. The fact that they are so good in doing appropriation and of technologies that we work this way. We put things in their hands and see how they reshape it, and then send another one. And that's what we're trying to do.
But then, if I may just add to this, then we need to also, of course, make that possible, because I think what we see today is, so where I'm also not sure whether data is not somewhat the new oil, because we are now trying to bring in property rights on data sets, because this is, I think, the new war, not on oil, but on trying to shield access from data sets, from the possibility to shape in a way that was not thought of before, and so there is, I think there's conflicts in the air, so we have to be at least aware of those conflicts.
I'd like to respond to your point that we perhaps don't need to understand how shaping takes place. I mean, from a democratic point of view, it is part of sort of societal and individual self-determination. That is what at risk or at stake here. Are we still able to sort of form a world that we want to live in? Or do we just let things evolve on their own terms? So that is, I think, an important issue, and that's why I would insist the question really matters. What are the shaping forces? Do we understand them, and are we able to also change them?
Yeah, but that's what I meant with we also need to be aware of where we cannot seemingly shape any longer, because that is a crucial moment where we would then need an answer to address that unshapeability, because that would be the first step to say, well, and then we would need to discern why it's not shapeable any longer, and then we would need to, whoever the we is, that is a very tricky term, how we can address this, whether we need then to bring in back the possibility to collectively shape, or whether we just say goodnight. But it also has a longer tradition that we need to bring to the fore or shed some light on forces that already in the past were not shapeable any longer, even by democratic standards, but which we tended to symbolically think that the we, the demos, or the demoi are really able to. And so this brings in a very critical aspect where we should learn from the past with regard to new technologies that in that respect might not be that new, that forces are at play that are no longer democratically accountable, and which could go now into a long tradition of the critique of capitalism, etc., etc.
I also think that in practice, these groups, they understand they are marginalized by the society, and they have developed strategies to go around that. They don't expect they would like to, but they don't expect to be treated in the same way. They know how the real world works, and they have developed strategies to achieve what they want, and which are different from the citizens of the society. So I respect a lot these different ways of redoing technology, often in spite of the aspirations of the original developers and producers of the technology. I think it's very common in poor communities. It's very, very common, and it's very important. It's a key shaping factor of technology in the end. Anyway, but in the ideal world, yes, but it's not an ideal world.
I have a comment, if I may. Although I understand what you're talking about and this appropriation of the new technologies, I think it is very important that people understand the risks of adopting technologies, and we are seeing a very different risks. So, for example, when cars arrived in places, people had to learn how to drive. You don't have to understand fully how the engine works, but you learn to drive, and you have to know what kind of risks you are causing by driving. And what I see when people are using technologies, especially linked to the internet and linked to these big techs, is that it's even for people here in this room who are educated people dealing with AI, sometimes it's hard to assess the risks of sharing your information. And then you go to these groups, and just as an example, the arrival of Starlink had a good effect of connecting people, but also we know that many communities are endangered now because they are easier to spot, and because there are other people that have access to Starlink there in the forest. And so I always feel a bit awkward about it. And then, because of this, so every time someone asks me whether AI is going to dominate the world or kill us all, I say, I probably not AI, but the big techs. And then when I was, so what Diogo mentioned, that all these bots scraping the internet are causing major losses to foundations like Wikimedia. So who has to pay for that? It's just, I know of two examples, like OpenAI made a deal with the city of Rio to have kind of open AI totems inside poor communities in Rio. Like, okay, they can use it for free, aren't we good? I mean, okay, they need diversity in their models, so this is a cheap way to get it. And how are we going to explain to those kids that were playing soccer in the street that they are putting their data inside this totem that they can use for free? I mean, this is a big thing. I would like to hear, Diogo, about this who is going to pay for the Wikimedia servers?
Yeah, that's one point that we are discussing a lot, because it will impact not only the people, but the whole digital ecosystem, especially with when we were talking to journalism or news. What we are seeing, for example, nowadays the paradigm is if you search for something, you receive the link, you click the link, and who create the content will receive the traffic, and this person or this organization will have direct and indirect gains. For example, I will sell ads and I will receive money, and the people will know me and can recognize me and can ask me for something. But nowadays, for example, we are changing this paradigm, and the people is using, it's starting, it's not like the major source of search, but they're moving towards LLM, searches based on LLMs, that the bot connect to the server, get the information, process the information, give a response, a prompt response for the user. So who created the content does not have like the
traffic
the benefits, you know. So how will it be? So that one topic that we're trying to discuss, especially with the major, for example, news platforms in Brazil, content creators, because it will impact a lot, and we will pay this for this. And that's one topic that we need to pay attention closely, because, and especially, and there is another risk. For example, it's common now, for example, deep research tools, and even researchers, they are using a lot those kind of tools. But the question is, we have a lot of paywalls, even in scientific community. For example, we have a lot of papers that we need to pay access for this. And sometimes the bot just bypass, and that's one problem. And sometimes they do not use that content to give an answer. So we are leaving a lot of great content out of this game. And that's another problem, because we will take decisions, we will do research based on a specific kind of information. So yeah, so that's a challenge.
Thank you. We have one question there, Christine.
Thank you very much for these three exciting presentations. What I wonder is, how do we get this critical and complex thinking into society in times where populism is around, where people are looking for simple answers, where people cannot imagine that there's another attitude that can also be true? You had these two ontologies, Christoph, so they are true in a way according to the context, so they don't exclude each other. They can be there at the same time. And I always wonder, because I love this critical approach, and it also adjusts to the pluriverse, that is the pluriversal thinking in Latin America, starting from the indigenous populations, having thinkers like Acosta and Escobar and so on around. But how do we overcome the desire for simple solutions and make this more complex and critical approach the usual way of talking to each other, of thinking, of raising awareness of someone else who is thinking in a different way is not the devil. So I would be interested in your thoughts about that from all the three of you.
So who wants to start?
So I have to go first, because the others can still think. No, that's a tough one. What I would like to extend is an invitation to think about this in the future together, maybe. Because I think this is I mean, if I would know, or maybe the others will have an easy answer to that, but then I might not be sitting here, actually. I think that this touches on the problem of science communication and the loss of a certain confidence in science in general, and indeed a loss of a democratic ethos, even. So basically what we would need, but that is of course now Frankfurt talking, we need to think about how to build society. So we need a social theory and a political theory of a society which faces existential crises on the environmental side, which faces existential or deep transformations on the technological side, and which faces profound challenges on the political side. And that might be what makes these times especially challenging, that every vector, every constant environment, technology, the political is in flux. So we need a theory of how to address this, and technology, AI, is but one facet of this more complex life worlds. Plural, consciously plural, because it would be too easy to say there is one world. So we have a pluriverse, if you will, a planetary dimension, but not in an Earth system science perspective, but more in a critical perspective. So this is an invitation to, I think, to all of you to come up with great answers, and the only thing that we can do is maybe continue these dialogues between different cultures, between different backgrounds, histories, disciplines, both on the individual, the organizational, and the societal level, to see how we can figure this out. And the problem is that this is not only if you will, an academic effort, but we need to bring it on the street fast. Otherwise, things will be lost. But I'm very sorry that I do not have a precise answer.
I think it's a great question to ask the new Pope to start with. Well, it's some divine help, because probably you need it. But one thing that dealing with these communities has taught me, and I have to say, I want to make one thing clear, is 3 years ago I didn't know anything about indigenous peoples in the world, in Brazil, etc. Okay, and I learned the last 3 years a lot, and discover how ignorant I was also. That was very important. But one thing I learned interacting with them, and I was really amazed, is the quality of the leadership that I found there. And the quality, and also my wife works with the landless and homeless movement in São Paulo. And part of the problem, I think, is that we are looking for answers in the same circle of people that we have been looking for the last 50 years. Okay, and even worse, I think now with all this, how would I say, this godification of business people that we saw in the last 20 years, that was promoted in the last 20 years, I think we we are missing a lot of listening to a diverse group of voices, and especially of voices of people who have a history of exploitation. I mean, in some ways, she was mentioning the issue of risk. They know they cannot trust. I mean, if you're a marginalized person, a part of a marginalized community, you know you cannot trust people. You know you cannot trust technology. So maybe it's easier to be careful. They are used to be careful about this, more than maybe we are. So, but independent of that, I think we have to open the circle of the conversation to, I believe, to solve this. And they are wonderful, incredible voices. I mean, I have dealt with some of the top business leadership in Brazil, and they are not in any way below them, okay? They are really brilliant people, okay? And then we have to learn this. We have to learn how to use this.
Okay. Okay, I think that's a hard game. And first of all, I believe we need to understand the whole scenario. And because we are discussing the technology, but we also need to, especially AI, we need to discuss who is behind the technology. And nowadays, for example, when we think AI, especially the narrative for the society, we have few groups, okay? Few people and with a lot of money, And they are setting the rules, they are creating our future, for example, especially with the narratives they create. And it's very hard for us to compete with them because they sell a story, a narrative that the technology will transform the world. For example, we have Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, that one leading AI lab, say that in 6 months we will not need developers, programmers anymore, because AI will do it for us, okay? And we see this, like everybody's talking about this right now, vibe coding, because that's the future. And okay, we will need to adapt our society for this. But it's very hard because they are, sometimes it's a lie, okay? They are saying a lot of things about their products that's not true. Sometimes it's half true. But they are creating the narratives, and they are creating the products, and they put the product in the market, and the people start using. I'm saying especially for the end user consumer, that's one topic, because I believe that everything changed with ChatGPT, not because of the technology itself, but because it was the first AI, a general purpose AI, not a general AI, an AGI, a general purpose AI, that was delivered to society. Say, hey, use it, try. And it changed the behavior, it changed what the people expect about the technology. And when I see, it's my opinion, when I see this scenario, I see that it's very hard for us to compete because they create the products and the narratives, and they are sometimes delivered for free. But there is no free lunch, right? No. So who will pay this bill? And it's a trillionary bill. So that's one thing that I believe. So to give you a direct answer, so I just give the context, I believe that the only way that we can organize the society on this is based on regulation and public policy. I think that's the only way, because otherwise we are delivering our future for 3 or 4 people that's creating what we'll use and in the way that they believe it's good, but not for society, for them. And I give you just one example. We are discussing a lot about screen time, right? And we have a lot of evidence about health problems related to screen time, okay? And last week we have the, how can I say, earning calls, I think, that's the name, balanço, I don't know, but earning calls from Meta. And one topic that they highlight so much was, okay, because we are using the most advanced AI, we increased screen time by 5%, okay? So it's good for them. It's good for the business. But is it good for society? That's the question. It's good for the shareholders also. But is it good for society?
We've had that with the cigarette industry and many others.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So just to finalize, I think that we need to have more discussion about regulation and also public policy related to those topics. Otherwise, we are discussing and it's not taken. Thank you.
We have a question there.
Muito rapidinho, vou fazer uso dos 5% em português, mas aí você traduza bem rápido. Queria dicas de vocês para a educação básica. Dicas, sugestões.
Okay, so translating, she's asking for hints for basic education. So what we can
I have one that's in my mind. Actually, UNESCO, they prepare a very interesting guide. They have two documents. One that's how to use AI in classroom. So it was based on ChatGPT. So I think that the name of the document is ChatGPT Guide for Education, because at that time ChatGPT was like the biggest one. But it's applied for different models, and it's use cases that you can use, for example, in the classroom, and they are very good. They are very good. And there is another one from UNESCO also that's a general recommendation from to use generative AI on the education. So how you can create a policy and which approach you should use. So those two documents, they are very good.
Do you want to comment?
I respect a lot of people who develop technology for children. I don't, because I like easy stuff like AI, not really hard stuff like how to educate children. And also, I mean, I had the privilege of working with Seymour Papert at MIT. And he always said, there's no way to do science in basic education because you want to see what happened after 20 years, and there's no way to control what happens in the middle. So it's very hard to understand, evaluate what you're doing. So first, I say, we have to look at the professionals, people who do work, who try to develop, who try to do new ways of teaching kids, and also old ways. But at the same time, I mean, kids are so amazing in finding ways out of stupid stuff that we put in front of them. And I'm always amazed by that. So in some ways, what helps us is that they are extremely resilient to a lot of nonsense, educational nonsense that we have been doing in public education, at least for 200 years. So but we should try to improve, but that's too hard. That's very hard. I don't try to do it.
I mean, the big question is, how do we address some of the issues that were raised before by my dear colleagues in that? So if we use ChatGPT in basic education, but then we know where that comes from and where the training data comes from and who is in control of that technology, that seeps through. So we need to be very aware that once we use that technology in basic education, the narrative and even more will remake the world of those kids. I trust that kids are to an extent resilient, but then I also see kids hooked to Netflix and whatever, and they get addicted to an extent. And once you're there, then it's not so easy to hope that children will be resilient enough to find ways to break that cycle. So using it will probably, or is coming up fast, I know that, but I would be very cautious. And of course I would argue that we need to have people who administer, who teach, who are professionals, who should be aware of what they're doing, and that will be difficult to find. So to really have those professionals on the ground, then we would need to drastically upgrade their training and the such.
I can share the best advice I've heard about AI. So how do you create AI kind of literacy from the basic education is teach them philosophy and let them play. Because you have to develop the critical thinking, and that's important. So in this sense, I think the prohibition now of the use of cellular phones at school was a very great move. I was talking to some teachers that they say, I can't recognize the classroom anymore. It's so different because kids cannot use it at school. So, I mean, the kids are using their cell phones at home and they are using ChatGPT. So I don't think kids under a certain age should have this at school. So now I'm speaking less as a scientist and more as a mother. But I'm an educator. So I think they have enough of technology outside the classroom, but what they have to develop is the critical sense and the ability to understand that things that are given at a certain cost and have certain effects, and this they can learn from an early age. And that's my... Any more questions?
Well, thank you so much for the 3 presentations. I'm Julia. I'm at the University of São Paulo and at the CIFAR-AI. I would like to ask Professor Claudio, you've mentioned the difficulty to obtain data in the Amazon. I would like to ask you if you could say more about the methods you used to develop strategies in making translations. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the issues of getting data is true for any small group of people. So in this case, we have for a specific language, but suppose you are trying to get data about air traffic, how air traffic controllers talk to each other. It would be as hard as to try to get the data that you're trying to do, in the sense of there's not much out there in the web. There are very few people who talk that way, and they don't necessarily trust you to collect them. So our approach has been, in the case of many of those languages, there's a lot of linguistic material that has been published in the past, dictionaries, theses, and then we talk to the authors, we get permission from them, and we mine those texts, which sometimes is difficult because some are old PDFs, which are a lot of idiosyncrasies. But the goal is not to build the perfect translator, it's to build the first. Something that shows enough that it can become useful, because we don't know if they are for that group. But if they are, then we can start a conversation about, we have to improve this thing that you find useful, we'll need to collect data. And then say what that means for that community, And especially, which is very complicated, how you are going to govern that data. Okay. In our case, one thing we are trying to do is in this, for Nhengatu, there is this group of writers, teachers, scholars called Academia in Nhengatu. It's a group, it's a very informal group. But they can work together. In fact, they work together to translate the Brazilian Constitution to Nhengatu in a project. So it's about 10, 20 people. And we think that could be the beginning, maybe, of a union, something like that. Something that an organization that can eventually become the guardian of that data. Not only because they care for that language, but because they can structure a social political organization that can engage with, for instance, a company that wants to try to license, for instance, the data. But just to finish, we take an approach where the language is proprietary. Indigenous languages are proprietary data. They are not legally, but from an ethical point of view, that's how we look at it. We consider every material copyrighted, which is not in practice, but we consider. And I tell some of the people I'm working with, imagine that you are working with Disney. Okay? If you know, Disney is the worst company to deal with in terms of IP, okay, in the world. Okay, they have an arm of lawyers, and they know anything about trademark. They can send you nest letters for anything. Imagine that you're dealing with Disney. That's how careful you should be when dealing with the indigenous data. Okay? Everything you should need to ask permission, everything you should discuss, everything you should work together. But more important, you cannot ask data if it's useful for the world. It has to be useful for them. This is an essential relational. It is called it's a basics of relational accountability. This is something you have to do. Is that, okay, what you're going to give them back. For instance, in our project, we saw that they wanted those 2 digital classrooms. I say, okay, we'll help you get them. Even if our project fails, they got their 2 digital classrooms, which is very important for them. Okay, which may fail. It's research, you know. But at least there is something back. But I'm not going to collect data until it's useful for them. I don't think it's a practical way to do research. Okay, from my experience, especially with and with experience from the linguistic people. I mean, we're dealing with indigenous people from linguistics and anthropology are extremely helpful because they have been through all this before, way before we as technologists, okay? But great question.
May I just follow up on that? How about synthetic data? Is it possible to come up with any, or is that, are you not yet there?
Synthetic data, that's a great question. First, you need to have help from them to validate the synthetic data, okay? And first, in this language, there's a professor in Ceará who built in very traditional means, not AI, a language generator, okay? I take the approach that whatever it's generated in their language is their copyright. Okay? It's like if I was writing in a copyrighted language like Klingon. I don't know if Klingon is copyrighted, right? You know, Klingon, the Star Trek language. You cannot write in Klingon without getting a nasty letter from CBS. Okay? But what we do is we treat that language as such. It's copyrighted. You're not allowed to write in their language. can have to ask permission. I think that's the high bar of ethical there. And then you engage with them, and it becomes easier. But that's the mindset we are working with them. Okay? Because otherwise it doesn't work. It's even practical way. They need to trust you, and because they have been exploited for a long time. I mean, there's this say from, I forgot the author says, research is one of the dirtiest words in most indigenous languages vocabulary in the world. So, and we are the ones doing this dirty work against them. Okay, so there is a long tradition of exploitation in science of these people. So be careful, be respectful, take the high ethical bar. That's the way to do it.
Okay, I'm afraid we have to stop here now. So let's thank again our 3 speakers of this panel for their contribution. And we have one more session before the coffee break, right? Don't go.
So now we came to our last content session, which is the final keynote from Brazil. The final keynote will be shared between Professor Anderson Rocha and Professor Renata Wasserman. We'll start with Professor Anderson Rocha. I will briefly introduce him and invite him to the podium. So Professor Anderson Rocha is professor at the Department of Information Systems at Unicamp in Campinas, where he also got his PhD. He's a fellow at IEEE Society and also the co-founder of a laboratory on artificial intelligence, the Recode AI, if I spelled correctly, yeah, at Unicamp. So welcome to Anderson, and the stage is yours.
All right, so good afternoon. It's very nice to be here because in the last 2 days we have been hearing the need to have specialists in the loop, to have specialists in the first stage when collecting data, all the preoccupations that you have in that part, during the development of the solution, and then when you have the solution, how you validate it. So the importance of having humans and not replacing humans. So my question to you today is more like a provocative form, so you can go home and think about this. Do we want artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence? This is a very important moment in our lives to discuss about this, because humanities have been pursuing the extraordinary forever. In ancient dreams, we created myths about modern labs or modern gods that have powers to conquer things, and automata that could do some surveillance in specific areas. We discussed philosophical foundations for this kind of thing, and it shaped some of the evolution of technology. Some examples come from Greek mythology. Here we have Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, or the god of metallurgy, who created Talos. Talos is an automata, and we are talking about some story from more than 3,000 years. This automaton of bronze was to protect the island of Crete, and Talos represents humanity's ancient dream of creating mechanical beings. And then we have Aristotle in his studies, politics, in which he discussed the only situation that I can anticipate that we do not need masters and slaves, or landlords or lords and people working for them, is through something that we can give orders, and this thing will anticipate what to do automatically. We are talking about automata again. And we have some nice examples. Leonardo da Vinci, in the Renaissance, created an automata. It was not a robot, because the word robot comes from the Czech, and robot means slave in Czech language, and it was created in 1920. But Da Vinci created a mechanical knight capable of sit, standing, and move using some levers. Vulcan's duck, have you heard of Vulcan's duck? He created like a small robot, but it was not called a robot yet. This robot was able, it was a duck, it was able to eat, digest, and shit. Yeah. The first part, eat, yes, the robot would get some corn. It would digest because it had some mechanisms of grinding the corn. But they discovered afterwards that the shit part was like some part that was stored there already. So he put the shit there just waiting for the command to shit, actually. So he kind of shitted in this mechanism. And then we have the Mechanical Turk, which is the origin of the name of the Mechanical Turk from Amazon for annotation. This Mechanical Turk played Napoleon in Vienna in 1809, but it was like a person inside the box playing chess, pretending to be some automata. So we always pursued the fantastic, but we always had this kitsch mechanism, like we have in art. When art is kitsch, is exaggerated, some solution that's not ready. We always had this also in technology and in AI nowadays. We have nowadays the concept of AI kitsch. So the people that try to sell something that do not work, but they oversell. They say things that these tools, these solutions do not do, but they try to convince you that they do. And the first thing they try to do to convince you that they work is to call it magic. When you call something magic, it means that they are asking you not to criticize it. They are asking you to just think and believe that it will work. When you do not criticize, you do not demand changes, you do not demand legislation, regulation, you do not demand improvements. So if you go to a store and you buy a pair of shoes, if they have a hole, you do not go home with those shoes. But you keep buying solutions in AI and technology that do not work. And they are saying to you that they are magical, but they are not. And as Renata was saying, is AI going to dominate the world? I return to you with a provocative question. The best solution that we have nowadays based on AI is a product of 3 matrices that we have behind the technology of transformers. If you go back to high school, do you think that the product of 3 matrices will dominate the world? No. But people that know how to manipulate those products can dominate. So we have in the evolution of the technology, we have the mechanization, manufacturing, electrification, all of them with great impact in our lives. And then with computing and AI coming with the Turing's question in 1950, we have all of these discussions in how can we create some software that can anticipate decisions and do decisions without explicit programming. And then we have people discussing the impacts. So right now we are at the level of this pyramid. The bottom level of this pyramid is we are in the stage of unintended consequences. So you buy something, it does not work, it has some unintended consequences. You try to generate an image of a football field without an elephant, and then it creates a solution with an elephant in the center. You try to ask it to do not put the elephant there, it keeps putting. So these are solutions that sometimes they have unintended consequences. Sometimes they are just small consequences. Sometimes they are serious. Sometimes they have diagnoses of diseases for people that do not have those diseases. Sometimes they leave people that go home thinking they are healthy, and they are not. They are healthy, they are not. Then we go for the next level of solutions that those are the autonomous systems. And here the consequences might be more complicated. Imagine that you have autonomous cars. So you have accidents. So we just saw some of them in the last years. And then some people believe that we are going to have in the next decade superintelligence. I believe that we are not going to have superintelligence anytime soon, but we might have very good solutions for specific problems. And that's okay, because what I want, what I believe, is that AI should be augmented intelligence, not replacement. So just to put in context, what is AI that I mean here? AI is anything that we need to get data from the world, perform some kind of automation, systems that perform tasks without or with minimal human intervention. We can do some analysis, software that process vast amount of data. We have learning components, algorithms that improve through experience. And then, of course, if it's AI, it needs to act upon the world. So we need machines that make decisions and implement those decisions in practice. They change the world. That's why we say that AI is not a tool, is political. It changes the way that we live. And what is augmented AI or augmented intelligence? Augmented intelligence is the solution when you have a solution that's developed through human and AI partnership. Systems designed to collaborate with humans, not replace humans. These systems should have enhanced capabilities that amplifies our capabilities. If we're talking about a medical doctor, is a solution not to replace the doctors, but to work in tandem with doctors, to have more capabilities to diagnose diseases and to propose treatments. So we are talking about complementary strengths with the humans in control, not only in the decision process, but also in the data collection process, in the authorization, in the respect for the communities, as Claudio was mentioning, and in the understanding of how the solution is developed. So the process of developing is also under control of the humans, and then in the deployment of those solutions in the decision part. So you're talking about AI versus augmented intelligence. Instead of replacing, instead of autonomous system, instead of minimal human intervention, we want enhanced human capabilities. We want collaborative work. We want central. We want humans with a whole that's central in the process of development. As an example is calculator. Calculators did not replace us. They were here to improve our capabilities of doing calculus. So all of this is rooted in humanism. Humanism and its core principles. We advocate for human dignity. Each person has inherent worth and must be respected. We are talking about individual agency. Humans should be free to make meaningful choices. We are not talking about here about human manipulation or disinformation. We should think of how to mitigate those problems. So we need an ethical framework. We need to expand our creative potential. So we need an ethical foundation. We need to design solutions that are inclusive, transparent, and that empowers us. And we have many lessons to learn, especially from the industry revolution. We had an initial fear, then the adaptation period, and the long-term benefit. We here in 2025, we think that the industrial revolution was all rosy, but it was not. It needed more than 70 years for people that were not owners of the machines to collect the benefits of the Industrial Revolution. 70 years. So during this period of adaptation, many things needed to be done. People needed to unite and create unions and create collectives and demand for changes. Now the same thing is happening again. But now the AI transformation, the technology transformation is much faster. We are not going to have 70 years to adapt. And that's why we need to demand legislation, regulation, programs from the governments and entities for retraining, reskilling, understanding of the solutions, demanding transparency, unbiased solutions. And if we want that, we cannot think of these solutions as black boxes and magical things. Imagine during the colonization of America, when we saw the indigenous peoples here, they saw people coming with horses. They had never seen horses in their lives. For them, horses were gods. We cannot see technology as gods or magical things. We need to see it as mathematics. If we see it as mathematics, we can demand explanation and changes. Just for you to have an idea, the ethical challenges that we have in autonomous AI nowadays, 90% of decisions are without oversight. 80% of the decisions without explainable solutions. And 70% of them are biased. Just an example of what's going on. And we have many failure cases. COVID-19 is an example of that. After COVID, during COVID, many people did research on analyzing X-ray images to detect COVID. And then one group here, oh, we are analyzing thousands of images and we can detect COVID. Another group there, another group there. After COVID, some group in the US did an exercise of analyzing 200 of these studies, getting the source code, implementing them. Do you know how many of them worked in a hospital? None. None of them worked in practice because they were developed without specialists, without thinking of the specifics of deployment. Another example is Theranos. Theranos is a company that was worth $8 billion one time. Elizabeth Holmes made the cover of People's Magazine and Forbes and others. She was claiming that with one sample of blood, they could be able to detect more than 50 diseases, and with AI. It failed miserably. So we have many risks of AI kitsch. Superficial implementation, premature deployment. In health, we have patients' harm. And we also have signs that are warning signs. Be aware of black box algorithms, limited transparency, and excessive claims. So we need accountability, equity, deal with people with considering their dignity. We need to consider privacy and autonomy. So the future that I see here is a future of AI as co-pilots, working with us and not to replace us. One example that we try to do in our lab, just to finalize here, is VivaBen. VivaBen is a project that we started 3 years ago, and now is being promoted with FAPESP to a center, research center. And in VivaBen, the data collection starts with the specialist. The development of the tools have the specialists, and the deployment of the solution have the specialists to validate. So specialists all the way through with us helping them to understand the problem. So it's human-centered artificial intelligence. So data collection, solution deployment, development, AI analysis, and expert validation. Humans in all these stages. For this, we research how to detect Parkinson's first signs, anxiety and stress, sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscles and strength for the elderly, and metabolic and problems with sleep. So computing power is important, data is important, but much more important is the real understanding of the problem with humans. So we monitored patients, we detect the patterns, we have clinical validation, and we do recommendations that are validated by the experts. The same thing goes for ORUS. ORUS is a project with FAPESP, it's a thematic project to detect disinformation. So to detect disinformation, you need to have specialists, people that understand about the language of disinformation. We are talking about social scientists, we are talking about journalists, we are talking about linguists. So having them in partnership with us, we can propose solutions that will help us to find fake videos, fake images, fake audio, deep fakes, fake journalism. And finally, just to conclude, an example of COVID-19. During COVID, we partnered with Esther Sabino from USP, the first Brazilian to make the sequencing, DNA sequencing of the SARS-CoV virus. And we partnered with also the Pharmacology Institute in Unicamp. Our idea was to detect COVID through a blood sample. The first solution, after collecting more than 1,000 patients in Brazil, gave 95% detection accuracy. PCR, the best method in the market, was 90. Then we talked to each other and say, yeah, that's wrong. We just started this. Less than a year, we get a test that is like 95%. It's wrong. But we had the specialists with us, and we had explainability. Then we understood, looking at the metabolomics and the ions that were present in the blood, we discovered that the algorithm was separating people taking antibiotics and people not taking antibiotics. Everyone with a symptom of COVID would go to the hospital, and the first thing would get antibiotics. And people staying at home, of course, they were not taking antibiotics. We made a very good classifier to separate people with antibiotics and people without antibiotics. Then we taught the algorithm to discern this case, and then the second time it was 92% accurate, because it now knew all of the antibiotics possible that we could give it. Then we discovered with the analysis of the ions that it was separating people taking coffee and people not taking coffee. Because, of course, patients that would go to the hospital would get antibiotics and not coffee. But people staying in Brazil, you're talking about Brazil, you know, we love coffee, right? So we could see caffeine in there. So that's why explainability, transparency, and humans in the loop are important. So we need to understand our fears. We need to fight for our agency. We need AI as a partner. And we need to think about it as a co-creator. So for that, we need to remove the digital divide. We need to invest in public education. We need to invest in bias audits. That's the future where AI benefits us all. The path for autonomy or the path for augmentation. That's your choice. That's our choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Anderson, for the great talk. And now we'll have Professor Renata Wasserman. I'll probably introduce her. Professor Renata Wasserman is at the Department of Computer Science at the University of São Paulo. She got her PhD from the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and she's a researcher at C4AI at USP. So Renata, welcome.
Okay, thanks, Eduardo, and thanks, Anderson, for saying so much I wanted to say in my talk. I can be very short now. And I must say, I totally agree. I think we have to see AI as a tool and not let us shape us and control us. I tried to, it was very hard to think about what to say here after all these very interesting discussions. And one thing that came to my mind is this, it's changing here, but not there. It changes here, so it's working. Yeah, it's not there. Yeah. Not there. So So I can see the next page here, but not in the screen. But just to start, so the next slide is about definitions of AI that we find in the literature. So after the first discussion here, I was thinking, like, how can we discuss AI if we don't know what AI is? And the thing is, nobody has a clear definition of what artificial intelligence means. And in the slide, I have a picture of a division that's given in the Russell and Norvig textbook, which is the most well-known textbook of artificial intelligence. And okay, I'm expecting it to come anytime. Let's see if it moves now. Okay. So they propose this division into 4 squares here along two different dimensions. Do you want to talk about thinking? Do we want to to have machines that think, systems that perform thinking, whatever that means? Or do we want actions, like a car is acting in the world, an autonomous car is acting in the world? Some of the things we have are not really acting, but are making decisions or giving explanations. And the other dimension is, do we want to reproduce human behavior or rational behavior? And these are completely different things, although we say we are the only rational animals in nature. That's not so true, and lots of things that we do are not rational at all. And then we have to be very careful when defining what we want to do. So what are we looking for? And if we are trying to mimic, I mean, it's not that one is wrong and one is right. So there are lots of neuroscientists trying to understand human reasoning, human thinking, human decision-taking. This is not saying how a decision really should go. So a rational decision would be like taking the best choice given some rules. And we get very confused navigating this world of what are we looking for when we create artificial intelligence systems. And there are things that philosophers and other people have been studying for centuries and thousands of years, like all these moral dilemmas. And there's this very nice site, The Moral Machine, where you can try and judge different contexts and what do we do. So if I see the train is going to run over 5 people, and if I push a lever, then it will run over only 1 person. What should I do? So this is kind of, it was always seen as a philosophical issue, but now, if we are building some autonomous systems, we have to think about these moral dilemmas. So Anderson was mentioning autonomous vehicles. Supposedly, they make less mistakes than human drivers. But then there are all these moral decisions. So if the car has to choose between running over a bunch of people in the street or making a turn and hitting the wall and killing the passenger, what choice would it take? And then who is going to make this choice? Is the company producing the car responsible for the choices? So which car are we going to buy? The one from the company that says, my car protects the lives of people outside the car over people inside the car? Or am I going to buy the car from the company that says, my car protects the passenger life over anything else? Of course, the companies won't tell us what's going to happen, and this is the main problem. And yeah, we've seen, so Anderson mentioned, we've seen all these accidents, so yeah, congrats, Tesla autopilot, and a week after there was this accident in the news. And then, so all these moral dilemmas are things that we have to think about, and so that's why I agree with Anderson. We don't want fully autonomous decision makers, at least I don't. And then I wanted to talk about a second point, which is mostly here, when we were talking about AI, people were thinking of machine learning and what comes next. And AI is not only machine learning, and it's never too much to repeat. So I come from symbolic AI, so my view is completely biased. And what is symbolic AI? So this is how AI started. And Anderson mentioned the Dartmouth meeting in '56 when the term artificial intelligence was coined. This was organized by a logician. The term was coined by a logician, John McCarthy, who was one of the most important people in AI, last century at least. And the idea there was most of the people were trying to formalize what it is to take a rational decision. So not only, of course, inspired by how we reason, but writing formally the arguments, pros, cons, and inference rules, how we make explicit things that are implicit in our knowledge. And there was a lot of development there. So in the 60s and 50s and 70s, there were all these expert systems that appeared. So in all history books of artificial intelligence, at least the good ones, when they tell the story, they tell about these expert systems. So there's Dendral and Mycene that were, Dendral was for chemistry. I think Matthias mentioned the difficulty of predicting some structures in molecules. So Dendral was made for that, and Mycene was suggesting treatments for infections. And they were based on rules written by experts. So not learning over billions of gigabytes of data, but learning from the experts. So people interviewing the experts and say, okay, when you see this symptom and that one, what do you take into account when you recommend this? And this is a very intensive work. So it's very hard to get the time of the experts, and these systems were called expert systems, and they were successful for a time, and then there came this so-called AI winter, the first AI winter, when people were very disappointed. And at that time, they were disappointed mostly because these programs, they didn't scale, so you could only handle small problems and not very large ones. So people were playing with block words, so solving problems of putting one block on top of the other, but not real big things. But of course, this was the 60s and the 70s and beginning of the 80s, so the computational power cannot be compared to what we have now. And the thing is, what we have now, all this data-driven AI, there were several discussions here, even this last panel. So who owns the data, and are we going to share the data, reuse the data? But data looks like this. This is data. And this is real data from a project I had. So this is from the public health system here in Brazil. Brazil has this probably the largest public health system in the world, and there are many, many computational systems involved in the functioning of the system, the whole public system. And each one records data in a different form, in a different format, with different meanings, and it's very hard to make sense of this. Of course, you can put it all in the machine and let a machine learning algorithm come up with an explanation for this data. But we know who created this data sometimes, and we know what they were. If we get to know what they were thinking, we may represent it in another way. So in symbolic AI, instead of data, the most important part is the knowledge, so the things we get from the experts. So, okay, some database engineer implemented all these data systems, but there were some people dealing with the health records that were thinking about the meaning of all this information. So what we want is to have knowledge. So as I said, expert systems came into kind of forgetfulness in this winter of AI. But then we started talking about knowledge-based systems, which are expert systems in a modern format. And not all in AI is only data. So in particular, I work a lot with ontologies, and ontologies, they have some resemblance to the philosophical meaning of ontology, but the idea here is to represent concepts, their relation, how they work, and it's not only me, so there's lots of ontologies being shared everywhere in the world, and with these explanations, we can make sense of the data that was there in that spreadsheet full of numbers and codes. So the idea in symbolic AI, and probably the most successful tools now, relate to the use of ontologies to access data. So a specialist, like a doctor, doesn't have to know how a database works in order to ask a question. But also, we don't want to ask a question through an LLM and not know what it is going to answer. So I think the difference in symbolic AI people like me, we come from logic, which is a mathematical discipline, and we want to prove that things are correct. We don't want only to use it. And I think for some critical systems like medicine and health, you have to be sure before applying something. So what we have in these ontologies is actually a collection of human knowledge about functioning of the body, diseases. So this is the disease ontology, but so if you see here, this is part of other ontologies here. So CABI is a chemistry ontology, and I'm working now with some people in bioinformatics. We're working with cell metabolism, and when we want to describe reactions, we always find this problem that different groups are using different names for the same things or the same name for different things, and we have to find a way to make them communicate. So we are creating these ontologies, but we can base in several ontologies that are already available, and biology and medicine are really the areas where most of the ontologies and where ontologies started. So the gene ontology is probably one of the oldest ontologies still in use. So an ontology describing not only what every gene has, but the concept, what a gene is, what the parts of a gene are, and how they interact with other things, and we can use this in our metabolic explanation. And once we start describing things here, so once you open here, so here I'm showing only the concepts, but there's more information there. But you say, okay, a disease can be by, for example, a disease by an infectious agent, and this could be a bacteria, a fungi, parasite, viral infectious disease. There are lots of different kinds of diseases, and the fact that we classify this previously makes us, it's easier to find inconsistency in data, for example. If you know that you're dealing with a bacterial disease, you cannot relate it to another kind of treatment that would be for viral disease. So you have rules about what kind of treatment applies to what kind of disease, what kind of exams can be used, tests to find out about each kind of disease. So this can help us to clear, because data is not always reliable. And I'm not saying that ontologies are always reliable, but they are usually built with great care. You can prove there's logic behind them. You can run an inference engine. You can find inconsistencies. So this is very useful. And when we say data can be completely wrong, so the first time I was involved in a project dealing with medicine. It was a cancer institute, and they had lots of data. All the doctors there, they were researchers, but whenever they had to write a paper, although they had things in digital form, they had to hire interns to go through all the electronic records and find what they wanted, because things were not classified properly. And at a certain point, they discovered there was a cholera outbreak in the hospital, but only in the data, not in the real world. So what happens was there was a field there that the doctors had to fill in, and they just didn't. And the first code for the International Disease Code that could apply there was cholera. So it was a drop-down menu where no doctor has time to do that. And that's also something people were discussing about artificial intelligence and health. There's this article on the New Yorker for maybe 6 years ago that I recommend to all the students, which is called Why Doctors Hate Their Computers. And it estimates the time that a doctor has to spend now, instead of being with the patient, but filling in these long forms with lots of codes, and then in the end, we get wrong data. So it's very important that we have a symbolic layer, so we have some way to see whether the data is consistent before we use it. So this is another example of a representation of an ontology, here showing some of the relations. So you don't only have the concepts, but you also have relationship between concepts. So, okay, for thousands of years, people studied human anatomy. So then you have the names, and you know, a head has exactly one face, and exactly one scalp, which is the part behind the face, and this can all be used in a system when you're going to describe a human being, for example, and used when you're looking for a location of a disease, for example. And then when we have these autonomous tools, most of them, they are using machine learning, which we may see as a black box learning of patterns. And sometimes you need that, and for some things it's useful. But as Anderson was saying, we also want things to be explainable. And then when we look at the people doing explainable AI, they are reinventing logical languages. So a language to produce explanations that you can put together and describe arguments and explain what you're doing. I mean, this is logic, and this was invented 4,000 years ago. And we have this, for many years we had this problem here, people doing machine learning, and this is how symbolic people see machine learning, black box learning of patterns. You don't know what it is, you don't know why it works, you don't know how it works. And on the other hand, you have expert knowledge. So if you're working with medicine, you have medical doctors and thousands of years of understanding of diseases. But then the new holy grail of artificial intelligence is to put things together. So the buzzword in all the conferences now is neurosymbolic AI. So most people don't know symbolic AI, but people that go to AI conferences have learned about neurosymbolic AI. And this is a way of putting things together. So of course, there are many benefits of using machine learning tools and deep learning and so forth. And for language treatment, we have seen an enormous advance, although I do miss the time when I was doing grammars in Prolog and having to understand language instead of just letting the machine do what it wanted. But we can put things, so if we can use the expert knowledge combined with the data-driven AI, that's the, as I said, the holy grail, so we can have the best of both worlds. But there's no simple way to do it, so there are lots of people trying to combine systems in different ways, and this is still a very rich research area for the future. And just because I wanted to finish with something, when I think that rule-based explanations should come, or rules, normative rules should come in order, like when I hear all the discussion about the biases on data and biases in LLMs, so you have people saying, so again, I see a person defending a company saying, okay, when we see that our LLM is giving racist answers, we flag it, and then it goes back to training. But then, you know, it's billions of dollars invested in training and retraining. Why can't we have some rules on top of it? Of course, it's very difficult to describe exactly what it means to put a rule that you cannot have hate speech, a rule that you cannot do that. I'm not saying it's easy, but it may be easier than training and retraining and retraining and paying billions of dollars for these systems. And it's as hard as having the 3 laws of Asimov, where they are supposed to work very well. And here you see that this cartoon shows that if you try to mix up the rules in the wrong order, so you have to be very careful with the knowledge you gather and how you enforce it, because if you just change the order of things, precedence of things, a huge mess happens. So thank you very much. And
thank you, Renata, for the great presentation, and we have time now for some questions. One there.
Hi, I'm Daniel Gitter from the Mauá Institute of Technology. My question is mainly to Professor Renata, and mainly the thing that I'm wondering is what is the role of causal inference algorithms and explainability algorithms in this joint work of AI as a black box and expert knowledge, and mainly on medicine systems or when you're dealing with public health or health itself?
First, I need to know exactly what you mean by causal reasoning, causal inferences, because this is a theme that was already present in AI for many decades. And there were many people like Judea Pearl and others that wrote books about causality and using logic and logical inference, or there are probabilistic approaches also to causality. I don't know if you mean this, or the new research trying to make things explainable.
The classical one that you mentioned, the probabilistic approach itself.
So this with the explainability, I think it's a lot, but you cannot. I see that people are now trying to recover explanations using LLMs themselves. And the problem is, how do you know that the answer which is given has anything to do with the process that led to the answer? I find it very hard because these systems are not, especially LLMs, they're not transparent at all. So you don't see exactly how things are going on there. But if you have a formal description at some point, then you can have what this trace of the reasoning process and see what happens in each phase, and then this is an explanation.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the presentations. I am doctorate in science candidate at Information Science at School of Communications and Arts. More specifically in the research line of knowledge organization in information science. I have a question and like more a provocation, but the two presenters. Firstly is about the ontology presented. Is more a curiosity about what's the foundation ontology used to create this ontology? Was used, for example, the Unified Foundation Ontology or BFO?
The one I had in the slide, the first one I had in the slide is BFO. So, yeah. And we have lots to learn from information science.
And other question, how it is was thrown out about the interoperability and the augmented intelligence can support the process of the ontology creation, thinking, for example, related to interoperability and how it can be accessed by people in different contexts of document access.
It's about
I think that all the processes that we design, we can have the discussion of how to include humans in a better way. So instead of having different ontologies and each one in its silo, we could think of something that could be more general, and having experts helping in that, it's the best way. Think about this. Suppose that computer scientists normally, believe me, I'm a professor in computer science, so many people studying computer science, they think that they can solve all the problems. Especially, just give me the data, and when I have a solution, I'll go there and talk to you. This is typical, especially in students starting with data science and AI and things like that. So imagine that they are just doing this new ontology without any expert help. They might try to reinvent the wheel, right? So I think that when you have the humans in the loop, you might come with a better way of representing, or not. That's science. But I think that when we include humans, the output is better.
And I see. So I mentioned this problem I'm working with people from bioinformatics. They have this problem. That's the typical problem of interoperability, but not interoperability of tools, but of knowledge. Yep. So the thing is, there are like 4 or 5 major research groups around the world doing these kind of things about cellular metabolism, and each one has a different ontology behind the work. So the way they represent things and the way they publish the papers and the way they publish the data, it's completely different. And what happens is, so I was following the steps of the researchers in one of these groups, and it takes something like 2 years when a student comes to this group to understand how things work in that particular group. And then they cannot reuse knowledge from other groups, so they have to read and reread the papers and several times, and very often they have to do all the experiments again. So really go there with the cells and try and do all the experiments because they cannot reuse the data. So this is where I see the application. So we are trying to build this ontology exactly to map concepts from one side to the other so that they can help each other. Of course, there's a problem, an ego problem behind it, and some people try to hide the data, but not all. Not all of them.
Thank you. One last question. Claudio.
So both of you were against automation. So which task you'd like to automate from your lives? I tell mine. I like to throw all my receipts of travel in one bin, and my expense claim would be automatically made. Okay? That I don't want to impose that on anyone or on me. So some things I want to automate, and that's one. So what do you like to automate with AI?
Good question.
That you consider ethical to automate.
Okay. You want me to start?
Yeah. May I have to think, but go ahead.
I'm going to provoke you. So if you consider the book 1984, information was protected. So it was a surveillance state. It was difficult to have access to information. Counterpointing that, if you consider the Brave New World approach, you have a sea of data, and it's hard to find the information. So for me, the thing that I would like to have automated is the search for meaningful information. We see in many different fields that there are a new paper every day or every hour, considering some areas. So how do you sift through all of these new things and really find what's meaningful? So I would take the approach of Brave New World. How do you find what is useful and get rid of the rest?
For you.
For me, yeah.
Yeah, on a personal level.
Just something, the other day I was talking to a professor from Stanford, and they had one student whose only job was to go through whatever was put on archive every day and send to every professor he found relevant. They decided to pay someone just to do that. That's the crazy world we are in AI research right now. Daily updates.
And and this is where inequality comes from, because only in Stanford can they support the student to do this all the time. I mean, we cannot pay a student to do this kind of work. But it's funny because I was trying to come up with something, because whenever I think of something that should be fully automated, these are daily chores, so like cleaning, doing, okay, I have a washing machine, but you still have to sort things there. And the worst part is then getting things out of the washing machine, folding, and so whenever I think of these things, so maybe what I need are the humanoid robots that Katja presented.
Yeah. Then we go back to one of the talks today on humanoid robots. Okay, thank you very much. So join me on applause for the last keynote. And we are now approaching the end. I will ask Silke from the VH to come here for the final remarks.
So, good evening. As we come to an end of this important dialogue, I would like to express my deepest thanks to all of who contributed your time, your knowledge, your insights to this rich and to multifaceted discussion. Over the past sessions, we have explored artificial intelligence not only as a field of scientific advancement, but also as a force, how we live, work, and think. And I would like to thank to our partners, especially FAPESP, to our speakers, and everyone involved in the organization of this event. I have a special thank to our scientific committee, which was actually two of our German colleagues. It's Indra Spiker, Professor Indra Spiker, and Professor Matthias Eppel, and also Professor Renata Wassermann and Professor Andersen Horscher, for all the work in advance now of the contribution of the planning, the organization, to help with the good selection of panelists. Thanks a lot for this. And last but not least, I would also thank my team, which I couldn't have done, or we couldn't have done at the event. There are always a lot of people involved helping, so I would like to have a special thank for Anna, my project assistant, to Pamela, which is from our public relations team, Jean-Marcel, finances, and our intern, Patrick. Thank you. I hope I didn't forget anybody. Thank you very much. And now I want to call also Eduardo to come here.
Thank you, Silke, for the final remarks. From FAPESP side, I also have some final remarks. We think that the event was very good in terms of content, so very deep content, very fruitful discussions that help elevate the debate, the knowledge that we have on artificial intelligence, and for sure help all our community to advance the research in this area. The event is also very important in terms of internationalization. We had our scientific director in the first days mentioning the importance of the collaboration with Germany, and we also had the FAPESP week a few weeks ago held in Berlin, and we think that events like this one, they are very important to advance this type of collaboration. We already have a lot of collaboration with Germany, but this collaboration can increase for certain. And last but not least, the event contributed to relationships. We were very happy to see that many people were talking about next opportunities and research opportunities in the coffee breaks, in lunchtime. And we think this type of personal connection is very important for next project opportunities and advancements. We also have some thanks, especially to DVH for the collaboration that enabled this 11th dialogue. We want also to thank the speakers that were very generous to come here and share their knowledge with the audience here in presence, and also people that are watching us over the platforms. We thank the scientific committee, like Silke already mentioned, personally each one of you, for assembling the program. FAPESP event team, Vera and the whole event team. FAPESP also a collaborations team, Fernanda and the whole team. Also the assistants here, Irina, Camila also, so 2 times, Patricia and Janaína. And the technical team upstairs, the sound and the image, so Leandro, João, Guilherme, and Christopher. So thank you very much, all of you.
And I would also have a special thank to the audience for all the fruitful questions, which is not less important than the speakers itself or the presentations. So thank you very much to contribute here as well. And now actually we have a networking coffee, so you can still have last change to talk to the speakers which came from far or from near. And so you should use it. And thanks one more time. And for whom is going to travel far away, have a good flight back. And for the ones who are here in Brazil or in Sao Paulo, I hope we see you soon again for another fruitful event. Thank you.